Have you ever noticed how one small moment can occupy your mind for hours or even days? A conversation that didn't go quite the way you expected. An email you wish you had written differently. A simple decision that somehow turns into 20 different possibilities. You tell yourself you're just trying to figure things out. Just trying to make the right choice. Just trying to understand what happened. Yet the more you think, the less certain you become. It's a strange experience. Your body is sitting quietly in a room, but your mind is traveling through conversations that have already ended, imagining futures that may never happen, and searching endlessly for answers that always seem just out of reach. Most of us call this overthinking, and if you've ever found yourself trapped in that endless cycle, you've probably asked the same question. Why can't I just let it go? It's an easy question to ask, but psychology suggests we may be asking the wrong one, because your mind isn't endlessly replaying these thoughts simply to make your life more difficult. In many ways, it's trying to do the exact opposite. It's trying to protect you. And once you understand why, overthinking begins to feel a little less like a personal flaw and a little more like a deeply human experience. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest thousands of years ago. Every sound mattered. Every unfamiliar movement could mean the difference between safety and danger. The people who survived weren't necessarily the strongest. They were often the ones who noticed potential threats before anyone else. Over thousands of generations, the human brain became remarkably skilled at asking one simple question: what could go wrong? Even today, that question quietly shapes much of how we experience the world. Psychologists refer to one aspect of this tendency as the negativity bias. It's one of the most consistently observed patterns in psychological research. Our minds naturally pay more attention to criticism than compliments, to uncertainty more than certainty, and to possible danger more than signs that everything is fine. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. Missing one real threat could have carried enormous consequences. Missing one pleasant moment rarely did. The modern world, however, presents a different challenge. For most of us, the threats are no longer predators hiding in the trees. They're unanswered messages, job interviews, financial worries, relationships, the fear of disappointing someone, or the quiet feeling that perhaps we've made the wrong decision. Your brain responds to uncertainty much the same way it always has. It treats it like something important, something that deserves your attention, something that shouldn't be ignored just yet. And so, it keeps bringing the thought back, not because your brain wants you to suffer, but because, from its perspective, it hasn't finished protecting you. This is where overthinking becomes so convincing. It disguises itself as problem-solving. Imagine you've just finished an awkward conversation. On your way home, your mind starts replaying every detail. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. What if they misunderstood me? What if I made a terrible impression? Without even realizing it, your brain has begun searching for certainty. It believes that if it examines the memory carefully enough, it might finally discover the perfect answer. And that's what makes overthinking so difficult to escape, because it doesn't feel pointless. It feels responsible. Research on rumination, the tendency to repeatedly dwell on distressing thoughts or experiences, shows that this kind of mental replay often creates the illusion of solving a problem. But instead of producing clarity, it tends to keep emotional distress alive, particularly when the thinking becomes repetitive rather than constructive. In other words, your brain mistakes repetition for progress. It's a little like trying to untangle a knot by pulling harder on the same piece of string. You're putting in more effort, but the knot only becomes tighter. And before long, you've spent hours thinking, without moving any closer to an answer. Have you ever noticed that your thoughts rarely become overwhelming when you're completely focused? While you're having a conversation, working on a project, or solving a problem, your attention has somewhere to go. But later, when the day finally slows down, something changes. You're lying in bed, driving home, standing under a warm shower, looking out of a train window, and suddenly, your mind seems to wake up. Thought after thought begins to appear. Old memories, future possibilities, imaginary conversations. It's easy to assume something has gone wrong. But neuroscience offers a different explanation. Researchers have identified a collection of connected brain regions known as the default mode network. This network becomes especially active when our attention turns inward, when we're reflecting on ourselves, remembering the past, imagining the future, or trying to understand other people's thoughts and intentions. In many ways, it's one of the reasons human beings can plan, learn from experience, and make sense of their lives. Without it, you couldn't imagine tomorrow. You couldn't reflect on yesterday. You couldn't build a sense of who you are. But like any remarkable ability, it has a downside. Research suggests that persistent rumination is associated with differences in activity and communication within this network. That doesn't mean the default mode network causes overthinking, but it does help explain why the mind can become trapped in repetitive loops of self-focused thought. In other words, the very system that allows you to learn from your experiences can sometimes make it difficult to leave them behind. If every human brain is built this way, why do some people seem able to move on, while others replay the same thought for days? There isn't one single answer. Psychology suggests it's usually a combination of several factors. Some people naturally experience emotions more intensely than others. Personality research has consistently found that people who score higher on traits like neuroticism tend to experience more frequent negative emotions and may be more vulnerable to repetitive thinking under stress. Stress itself also changes the way we think. When life feels uncertain, your brain becomes more vigilant. It starts scanning for mistakes, searching for danger, trying to predict what could go wrong next. Ironically, the more uncertain life feels, the more your mind tries to create certainty. Even when certainty simply isn't possible. Life experiences matter too. Someone who has been repeatedly criticized, bullied, or hurt unexpectedly may develop a mind that stays alert long after the danger has passed. Not because they're weak, but because the brain learns from experience. Its job is to protect you. Sometimes, it becomes a little too good at that job. So, if overthinking is part of how the brain tries to protect us, how do we stop getting caught in the loop? Many people believe the answer is to force themselves to stop thinking. But that's a bit like trying not to think about a pink elephant. The harder you try, the more attention you give it. Modern psychological approaches take a different path. Instead of fighting every thought, they encourage us to change our relationship with those thoughts. Mindfulness, for example, isn't about emptying the mind. It's about noticing thoughts without immediately believing them or following them wherever they lead. Cognitive behavioral therapy, often called CBT, takes another approach. Rather than asking, "How do I stop thinking?" it encourages questions like, "Is there evidence for this thought? Am I predicting the future? Is there another explanation?" These questions don't silence the mind overnight, but they do something just as important. They interrupt the automatic cycle. Because every time you choose curiosity over fear, you teach your brain that not every uncertain thought is an emergency. And over time, the brain learns, not by force, but through experience. Perhaps the most comforting thing psychology reveals about overthinking is that it isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that your brain is doing what it evolved to do. It searches for danger. It tries to predict the future. It replays the past in the hope of learning from it. These abilities helped our ancestors survive. They help us solve problems, build relationships, and prepare for the future. But sometimes, the same mind that protects us also struggles to know when it's safe to let go. The next time you find yourself replaying a conversation, imagining every possible outcome, or searching for an answer that never seems to arrive. Pause for just a moment. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" try asking, "What is my mind trying to protect me from?" You may not find an immediate answer, but you might find something just as valuable. A little more understanding, a little less self-judgment, and perhaps the beginning of a quieter mind.